everyone, and welcome to today's MSP event. I'm super excited to get started. In today's topic, stop settling the compensation reporting you deserve. But before we begin, I'll give folks a couple more minutes to trickle in to the event. I always like to start things off with a fun icebreaker with our panelists today. So this question I'm going to ask is, are you a night person or a morning person? And I'm going to start things off with Jacob.
Oh, I think before I had kids, I was a morning person. I used to get, I was on a 6:30 train into Manhattan, and for most of the beginning of my career, I got a lot of work done before 9 a.m. I would not want to volunteer how much work I got done after about 3 or 4. Just my brain wasn't doing as much. But post kids, I tend to just try to make it as much as I can.
Carol, do you want to answer the question? Are you a morning person or a night person?
Sure. I'd say I'm sort of both. I don't know if you can choose. I do feel that I'm most productive in the morning, especially when there are no meetings and it's really quiet. But on the weekends, I do like to sleep in. So I'm a night person on the weekends.
Nice. And let's round it out with Jeff. Are you a night person or a morning person?
So I used to be more of an evening person. I just kind of grind through the evening, whatever I was reading or working on. But more lately, I've become more of a morning person. So I'll get up at 5:30 or 6, and I'm uninterrupted during those hours to get a lot done.
Nice. Very cool. I will consider myself as a morning person. I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast just recently, and my body still has not adjusted. So that worked in my favor because I've always wanted to be a morning person, and moving from Toronto to Vancouver has helped me do that. So it's been great. All right, so let's get started. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who are not familiar, hello everyone. My name is Angelica. I'm one of the community event managers at MSP. And we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they may not know about. We do this through our online session like the one you're at today. We also have an online robust forum and our quarterly summits. So if you're not already a part of MSP, you'll be invited to join right after the event. And I'm pleased to announce our sponsor for today's event, Captivate IQ. For those of you who are not familiar, Captivate IQ empowers organizations to build the right commission plans for fast-changing business goals, balancing flexibility to support any plan component with usability to own the systems and adjust commission strategies over time. They have helped hundreds of finance and operations teams solve the pain of managing commissions and move their plans out of spreadsheets or outdated systems to achieve fast, accurate, and audible commissions calculations at scale. Their solution has empowered tens of thousands of reps with transparent, clear, and actionable data to help them reach their sales goal. I'm going to drop their link here in the chat, so be sure to check them out. I also asked where everyone is calling in from in the chat, so be sure to let us know where you're calling in from. Next, I'm going to talk about the housekeeping slide. So yes, this event is recorded. If you have a colleague or friend that couldn't make it, don't worry. This event will be made available on the MSP previous event website by the end of the day. So you'll be able to watch the recording and look at the key takeaways that will be made available after the event. Lastly, if you have a question for our experts on this panel, be sure to check out the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner and ask your questions there. Or if you have a question, definitely feel free to add it in the chat. That will be also, you can take advantage of the chat as well. Now I'm going to pass it off to our awesome speakers today. I'm going to actually pass it off to Jeff, who will be moderating today's session, and I'll come back during the wrap-up. So Jeff, if you want to start the introductions, you can kick things off.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angelica. Appreciate everyone joining today. I'm honored and privileged to be moderating this panel with our two experts here today. Brief introduction to myself before I pass it off. So my name is Jeff Ignacio. I'm the head of sales and marketing operations at Forethought AI. where we believe the future of CX is human-centered artificial intelligence. And so my role, I've been a long time MSP member, so appreciate everyone joining. So our first guest today is Carol Chen. She's the VP of RevOps at Flywire. And we also have Jacob Sperry, the head of sales at Captivate IQ. I'd love Carol to give a little brief introduction to herself and then pass it off to Jacob.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm VP of RevOps at Flywire. Flywire is a global payments company. We help our clients get paid, and we help their clients pay with ease. So we help many verticals such as education, healthcare, travel. An example of how we help or how we run our software is if you're looking for a trip to, let's say, the Maldives, and the client is with Flywire, we help you pay the client, and the client gets paid really easily. So it's a great system to use to simplify payments across the globe.
Awesome. And Jacob.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. I'm Jacob. I'm at Captivate IQ. I oversee business operations and strategy. But before that, I spent 3 years running our implementation, professional services, and customer success teams. So I've got lots of experience dealing with setting up commission structures and maintaining them on the tool. I like to joke that I'm a recovering accountant. That's how I got into sales commissions, via the accounting side of things. I'm a deep lover of Microsoft Excel and mountain biking and board games. That's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Just thinking about spreadsheets, bikes, and the Maldives. I think we've got a lot of rich content to get through today, but we're going to shift to a more interesting topic, which is compensation. And if anyone's been reading the news, I think we're all aware that the market dynamics have changed considerably over the last 3 years, whether it's pandemic in 2020 or this year we're facing hiking interest rates. And so one thing that I'd like to comment on is the layoffs that are happening in the headlines and what that means and its implications on sales compensation. And so one of the topics I'd love to explore with Carol and Jacob here is how that is impacting planning. And so, my first thought is, how do we balance our needs to generate the revenues to hit our targets, while also, maintaining and keeping our high performing sales reps? And I think compensation is a powerful tool for that. Jacob, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are around the evolution of, or adaptation of comp plans in this kind of economic environment.
Yeah, definitely. I'll speak kind of on a macro level, try to provide a few specific examples, but we're definitely seeing quite a lot of updates to comp plans to accommodate for, in the best case, maybe sales that aren't performing to where they were. And then in the worst case is just needing to change team structures. So, if you're having a layoff, that immediate shock on a sales force, for those of us that have seen that, it can be pretty significant. You've got deals that are in flow. How do you want to maintain that kind of deal flow for your hopefully future customers? But then you've got more account-based teams. Is it an account management team, a customer success team, someone who's tracking renewals, things like that. So there's a lot of work to be done on just shifting accounts around. One thing I would point out is a lot of companies will have like a target attainment number in mind at the beginning of the year. Like what's that median quota attainment? So that like half or 50-60% of your sales reps would be hitting over that. And we started the year at a pretty fantastic run rate. I think for a lot of companies, there was a lot of overperformance on plan, and now we're seeing the other side of that in the back half of the year. So if you're expecting your attainment numbers to be worse, right, you're going to have fewer qualified buyers, fewer won deals, things like that. You're definitely seeing some quota adjustment down. And we see, again, a lot of companies try to target 50-60% of their reps. So if you think you're going to be only closing 90% of anticipated business, you might need to adjust your quotas down in order to do that. That's probably the easiest one. I can get into more weeds if we need to, but I'll start there.
Carol, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've been at multiple companies, probably 5, 6, where I've owned compensation. I would say compensation is one of the most important functions, because how you set up the compensation plan. It will drive how your sales team sells. Sales is very motivated by how they're getting paid, right? So I would say it's really important to be, especially in this current market condition, to be nimble. Some of the conversations, that I'm sure people are having is, as you're finalizing the budget for next year, where your sales wants to be, what's that growth number? How do you then, think about the costs that come with that? You want to grow sales without increasing costs too much, right? So some conversations, what's the trade-off? Do you increase quota per rep to try to save on potentially headcount? Or do you increase headcount and provide more opportunity for everyone to, actually provide, more quality time to their accounts that they need to, manage? So I think right now it's a lot of, modeling out of this scenario or that scenario. So we're in the planning stages, but I think nimble is the key that we're trying to be, so that we can, put ourselves in the best situation to handle what's about to, how things turn out.
So I appreciate all the commentary around org structures, adapting kind of your expected attainment percentages and clusters. One thing that I'd like to, maybe explore a little bit more is that concept of staying nimble and how do you exactly do that? Some ideas that come to my mind are putting a shorter leash on the comp plan creation. So instead of an annual plan, roll with that plan from day one and through the end of the year. You want to kind of visit what's happening on the back end on a much shorter scale. So perhaps actually exploring quarterly plans because you're actually seeing the environment change rapidly, and the information, the ticker tape's coming in pretty quickly week over week, and it does inform the business to be able to adapt quickly, depending on what you're optimizing for, whether it's attainment or a balance of retention reps. Another thing that I've been seeing is even considering moving beyond just attainment and commission, and also compensating on other factors that are actually going to sustain the business for the long term, and that is pipeline. I've hardly ever seen a business die because they've had too much pipeline or the right amount of pipeline. And so the question then is, if your buyers are losing to, or if your deals are losing to timing or no budget, which I'm seeing an uptick in my own win-loss reviews, the core question then is, well, have their problems actually gone away, or are they just delaying when they're going to implement a solution, whether they're going to have status quo, build it themselves, or even explore one of your solutions? So I'd be curious to hear about some of the kind of the ideas that have entered your comp plans, or some of even the craziest ideas that are out there that are hopefully inspiring your leadership team to think through keeping the team together. Jacob, I'd be curious to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah. I was stalling to see if you were going to say Carol first, but no, it's an interesting point about quarterly plan versus annual plan. I suspect companies that are already on annual plans, it'd be challenging to make that shift. We're close enough to the end of the year. Maybe that's when we'll see it, if there's any shift there. One other thing that I think you'll see is, the comp plan, it's trying to incentivize the rep behavior to create the right outcomes for the company. So one thing we have seen is some shifts in kickers, right? So adding a multi-year kicker or a prepaid kicker, something that kind of de-risks the deal for the company overall. Not really addressing that somebody who lost budget, are they going to have it again? But for those coming in and saying, hey, I can give deeper discounts, or really trying to unlock some pricing around de-risking the overall customer acquisition process. So seeing a lot of multi-year kickers shifting or being emphasized to accomplish that. I don't know, I'll pause there. I'll give Carol a chance to answer while I think of something else to say.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, you bring up a good point. And I think, Jacob, you mentioned some of the things I was going to say. On the annual versus quarterly, I think it depends on the maturity of the business. So, if you're impacted by these headwinds, as maybe most companies, I think quarterly numbers are good, or you could put an annual number together, but the business always has the right to review them. But I really think it's dependent on the business. I've been at companies where they change even month to month. And then on the just for next year, I think as companies are trying to stay within a reasonable budget, one of the things that potentially comes up to the table is, how do you incentivize the sellers to sell the products you really want them to sell? So maybe it's that kicker, or maybe it's that accelerator. But you can also, business can also pivot to like what products are bringing in higher margins, things like that. So, still selling the same, quota number, but potentially for a more profitable product could also help the businesses balance their costs and numbers.
So I love that idea, right? So, ops and operations are here to guide the business, to provide insight into, how can we de-risk our pipeline? How can we build enough pipeline? How can we target the right accounts? And two of the ideas that you both threw out there, I think are hugely interesting. One is urging or increasing a compelling event on commercial terms through kickers and trying to accelerate these deals. Putting an expiring offer on the table, I think, is still hugely important. At a product level, I myself am actually considering solutions that are all-in-ones or bundles, maybe even in exchange for an early renewal, throwing in other SKUs. So those are the things that I'm actually starting to explore, and I think those are some ideas to get the deal across the line. The second idea that I think is out there that you threw out is the product-oriented comp plans. So shifting what you pitch, what you position, not just in terms of either higher margin for the business, because at the end of the day, cash is now king, especially with the higher interest rates. But secondly, I think there are some certain products in different companies' portfolios that tend to lead to higher land and expand. And so it's that idea of selling a product that increases raising the switching costs or increasing the hooks within the business that allows you to say, yep, let's get a beachhead today. And then if the business outlook starts to brighten up, we are in prime position to expand. So those are some great ideas. So you talked about earlier, Jacob, about changing quotas. I've seen a study. If someone can link any research, that would be great. But I am seeing quota multiples coming down. But the second thing you talked about was org change, org structure change. Normally, I'd see that when you have a new head of sales come in, wants to make a big splash, big change. But you're talking about maybe a business necessity with the times that we're facing, and that can introduce a ton of change management and shock to the organization. And so, thinking cross-functionally beyond just sales, I'd be very curious to hear how you think about using advanced analytics to motivate cross-functional teams, and potentially why this can be so hard. So Carol, turn it over to you.
I think aligning everyone to certain business goals in general is tough, just because there's so many conversations happening, so many priorities being said everywhere. But I think motivating specifically the sales team might not be as difficult, especially if you can show them the data in terms of how they could earn more, or making sure they have the right data set. I think that they, at the end of the day, they're in sales. Well, one, maybe they love the craft, but two, they're there to earn as much as they can. So this is, what they want. Jacob?
Yeah. No, I'm resisting a snarky joke about salespeople motivation, but no, I think, cross-functionally, we're going through our year-end process right now, and I definitely see some parallels to the questioning here, Jeff. So I think it's well timed. That notion of advanced analytics, I actually like to back up a step, and this is my bias, I guess, as an accountant, and then overseeing a lot of pro serve and setting up the tool that we're selling. There are a lot of data challenges that you can have to just having that deep analytics. I think sales commissions represents, on some hand, there's some pretty simple data points like, okay, I want to know quota, and maybe you've got different quotas. You've got 6 or 7 quotas for a plan or 1 quota for a plan. But I think one of the inherent challenges with data that we see is that just by definition, the different plans, like they're different for a reason. They have different rules. They have different inputs. Like it might be a completely different data set coming in. It might be from Salesforce. It might be from NetSuite. It might be payment data. And so like by design, they create kind of disparate outputs. And so there's a fair amount of foundational work, especially the more complex the plan structures are, just to get to a data set that lets you perform those advanced analytics. And so that's a fair amount of the work that we can end up seeing on an implementation, is just making sure that at the end of the calculation, we don't just have statements for everybody to look at, but you have a combined data set that you can then work from. So that's my, I guess, obligatory point I had to make as a former ProServe person. But I'd say as far as just table stakes, tracking things like quota, what's the year-to-date quota, what's the period quota, what's the actual attainment credit, the quota credit that they've got, what's the available OTV, what have they actually earned? Those tell you some pretty powerful ratios, be they aggregated up to team or product or overall company goal. And then just finding the KPIs that are the right things, for those cross-functional teams. Like the product team probably doesn't need to know how the US East sales team is doing. But maybe they do want to see what the margins are, or what our cross sells are into a new SKU or something like that. So, if the product team investment thesis in creating a new SKU is that it's going to be able to drive win rate, drive retention, like you said, Jeff, give you that bundling angle. So I think it's more about identifying like what are the specific things that those teams can see, as well as having some organization or company specific kind of broad goals to track to.
So I think it's a smart thing, rather than just jumping into the trap question of how does advanced analytics solve cross-functional goals, let's back up. Let's start asking ourselves, what are those goals and how can we gain alignment across the organization? Because when I think about revenue operations or the combination of all the different functional ops, the goal is to create a flywheel from the first time a prospect hears or understands that they have a problem to the time they're evaluating an option, to engaging with your sales or your product team or through a PLG motion, and then actually becoming a customer, and hopefully over time recommending your product over and over to others. And it creates that flywheel effect. And so these cross-functional goals actually help to serve the needs of the business. The analytics themselves are just a tool, right? They're a tool to service either leading or lagging indicators and help instruct and inform decision makers on which way to proceed in order to achieve those goals. As I'm thinking about your cross-functional organizations, first off, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your orgs. How many different roles do you have comp plans for? I could tell you in my org, it's SDRs, sales engineers, which are an overlay, managers, which are an overlay, and account executives. I'm planning close to 6 or 7 comp plans for next year, and maybe even more as we expand our role type. So Jacob, would be very curious to see how you're planning.
Yeah. So I can answer for Captivate IQ specifically, but we have several hundred customers, getting pretty close to. I guess I'm not supposed to say certain things, but we're we have a pretty growing customer base, and this is a data point that we have. And we're in the process of doing some research and maybe providing some more in-depth answers to things like this. So around benchmarking and what we see, by industry, by size, things like that. So I can preview a little bit of that, but I think as the org grows, especially when you're dealing with, only 6 or 7 kind of roles that you're dealing with, every year it's pretty likely that you're adding a role, right? So for us, there was that time, like when, early on at Captivate IQ, when do we add account managers? How do you structure sales engineers? So there are lots of kind of foundational questions that will rapidly evolve as you go from, I think what we see is as you go from a sales org of 20 payees to a sales org of 200 payees, you're probably reinventing that sales org 3 or 4 times over that life cycle. So some of that's just inherent to growth, let alone the market pressures that we're looking at right now. I think I went too far down that tangent and forgot the core aspect of the question you were asking, Jeff. So maybe if you could just prompt me to come back to the script here.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. That's highly instructive for those who are on the call, who are at growth businesses, whether you're at a Series A all the way up to a pre-IPO organization. Throughout that time, your organization is going to mature. And so the thought process is, let's find the roles and responsibilities, and then let's align the compensation around those roles. And the question is really tied towards the advanced analytics, right? So at what point do you use those advanced analytics to inform what you're observing and seeing from, creating these new roles, whether it's a new segment, new specialist role. I'm just also very curious about how you're thinking about using that as a leading indicator.
Yeah. Leading indicators interesting. I mean, you've got the classic sales funnel that you would metric to, and it all starts to your earlier point with pipeline, right? And but as far as like introducing new roles, what are key things we look at? I think one thing we're all in the process of doing, in all likelihood, we're coming up on the end of the year. We're revisiting our plans for next year. There's that notion of I'm struggling to think. There's this like that pay performance analytic that you're going to do, right? Like, how did everybody attain? What's that range? What's that distribution of attainment? What do we pay out? What's that distribution of payout? Are there disconnects there? Are we overpaying people, underpaying people? Are we driving the wrong decisions? Coming out of that, it may be an incremental tweak, but it may be a discovery of, hey, like, I'm not cross-selling enough. Now maybe is the right time to introduce that account management team that's really focusing on cross-selling, upselling, getting that multi-year contract at renewal by adding a SKU, that kind of notion. And the other things are primarily growth driven, is when you'll start to see kind of separations out. I think the main 3 triggers that I would expect to see there, one is just geographical growth, right? Is it time to move into EMEA? I'm speaking as a US centric person, I apologize, but is it time to change, move significantly into a new geo where I don't just have my BDRs here reaching out to people there, but I'm establishing teams. The other would be new product. So am I going from a single SKU company to a multi-SKU company? And the third is kind of cheating and hitting on both of those things, but an acquisition, right? Did I just acquire a new business line? What do I need to do to fold their sales org into our sales org, or are they staying separate? So there's that whole kind of strategy and operational decisioning around what to do in case of an acquisition. And really, that's just a really, really fast introduction of a new product, a new geo, things like that. So those are the main 3 things. It's like, if it's not an incremental change, to kind of tweak the plan to make it perform better, but those are the main triggers that we see to just creating, it's time to add that new org structure to the team.
So I love that, because you're talking about, these green shoots, these little nuggets in your data that are telling you a couple of things that will then inform you how to potentially reorg your business. So the first you talked about, which I think is interesting, which is, are we penetrating the customer base to a sufficient percentage that we believe? And as we're rounding the corner to FY23, it's okay, what percentage of upsell and cross-sell do we want from our existing customer base? And are we meeting that bar? And if we're not, perhaps a new role creation is the way to go there, which is going to underlie a new comp plan. The second thing that you said I think is interesting, is moving from a single SKU, and this is usually happens with a young company. They go to a multi-SKU world. The question then surrounds around, do we continue along the path with the specialist, or do we move to a generalist model? And then what are those different product allocation percentages as part of our comp plan? And it all started from those advanced analytics and those hallway conversations that led you to believe that there are some changes in the plan. So Carol,
we don't see each other in hallways anymore at Captivate, but yeah, same.
They should create digital like video hallways for people. So
you got 5 minutes to kill, just hop into a hallway Zoom.
Exactly. So Carol, you talked about alignment. I'd be very curious to hear, how do you know that you've achieved alignment? What are those like telltale signs going into planning?
Oh, that's a good question. Achieve alignment. I think that, if we have everyone aligned to the business goals, meaning like what's the, ARR or sales or revenue numbers, however you refer to them, for your business, and everyone who can or plays a part in the sales process are aware and aligned to them. And then we have management who then aligns resources against them, then I would call that alignment. And even though I said it in like 10 seconds, aligning everyone in those different groups, you think about, as Jeffy mentioned, like probably 5 to 7 roles in the sales org. And if I think about other orgs, probably up to 10 different ones probably. So it's really hard aligning all of them. It's constant communication, constant reminders, good monthly review sessions to make sure that we are reminded what we've achieved, where we are, and what our goals are that we need to continue to strive for.
So part of that is that alignment is to row towards one direction and row together, hopefully at the same speed. But first, you have to get all those ideas heard and examine the business from all angles to understand, what are the pros and cons, what are the trade-offs for each approach. And that really comes down to how do we set up our business to be more proactive over reactive. And so I keep thinking about our incentive programs and how we can help guide our team to be to new earning opportunities, particularly when the headline risk is so high these days. I think folks are feeling quite nervous. So, what can we do as organizations to be proactive in order to do that? So, my first thought is how do we give time back to our sellers, right? So that they can focus and reallocate their time to the revenue generating activities that matter. And I think part of that is, having a sensitivity analysis, sensitivity scenarios, allowing reps to plan based on their book of business, where they could potentially land by the end of a time period. I can tell you that I've seen, reps guilty of building their own spreadsheets and trying to do their own accounting on their own. And I just think those are wasted cycles. And so the idea of giving time back to our sellers is hugely important for me as an operator to move my reps from being, reactive to proactive. So Carol, I'd be curious your thoughts around shifting that mindset.
Yeah. So we try to help the sellers understand like where they are today and where they can get to, right? So I think helping them forecast their own business is really important, providing visibility into their deals, helping them understand where accelerators are. Some of the metrics that we, I think, best practice to provide, we also provide is, 3 really important ones, such as like what's your win rate, what's your sales cycle length, and what's your average deal size. Because I think if you were to be able to provide them, then you can help the rep really understand how they're going to, close business, when they're going to close it. I think we lost Jeff.
He was very upset with what you just said.
So I'll finish and then I can pass to you, Jacob.
Yeah, let me know.
So I do think that those metrics are important to help the salesperson have visibility into, how they can find and calculate their own earnings potential. Hey, Jeff, I think we lost you there for a sec.
Yeah, I like Danos blipped out there for a second, so apologies.
Yeah. Carol's comment was great. You missed it, but it was really good.
I totally did. I'm not going to ask you to repeat it.
No, I was just saying it's important to provide the sales reps data. Sorry, Jacob. Just so that they can be able to understand, where their earning potential can come from, so that, they can calculate, what they need to potentially overperform or how they can get an additional incentive, and then when they need to close deals by, so that it can all be aligned with the company goals.
Yeah. To piggyback off of that, I think one of the cooler scenarios I've seen when first setting up a customer was that they had a specific Google sheet for every role, every team, and it was the sales ops team had built out. The commissions manager just built it out. I was like, this is a calculator that's going to replicate how your commission's going to be done. If you want to bring it in there, so to Jeff's point, like you don't want that salesperson maybe doing something they're not the greatest at. I think many of us on this call have probably spent a fair amount of time helping that salesperson to debug their own calculation to prove to them that ours is right. But it is great to have that kind of from a forecasting angle. I'm trying to keep the sales hat on. I'll put it on just a little bit to talk about this because I do think there's some really powerful system-driven functionality that you can have here. You know, and I'll talk about kind of that spectrum of reactive to proactive. Carol used that phrase, like people need to know where they are right now. And so one of the benefits I think you have in a system is there's a statement, not like a paycheck, right? Where you're able to see where am I, why am I there? Like what have I done year to date? And there's some things that we can layer into that from a functionality perspective on a more kind of robust build. You can see, let's bring in your pipeline and then forecast out kind of parallel to your actual commission, but like of this pipeline, assuming that everything in this stage will close in X number of days and 20% of it will win or something like that. You can build out kind of a forward-looking, what will this statement look like? What will your future statements look like, assuming those future deals close? And then the other kind of thing that a system can drive is that immediate access. So we call it a preview, a statement preview is, hey, I just closed a deal. Can I see what November's statement's going to look like right now for all the activity I've closed in November, instead of just only seeing October because it's closed and done. So that statement preview, going back to data, right? Depending on how that data is connected, it could be a real-time sync, it could be a daily sync, but some cadence where, hey, I closed a deal. 5 minutes later, I can see that commission was X. And I can see that I earned this kicker, or I moved into an accelerator, so getting into the exciting part of my commission plan, things like that. And then the last layer to that is kind of what if scenarios. So many commission plans you can break down into here are the 7 fields that if I define this field, like what the term is for a multi-year, what's my services amount, what are the different SKU values, things like that. And you can basically insert those into the core commission model engine and be able to see kind of a draft output of like, hey, if I close this deal that I'm proposing right now, here's what that's going to look like. So going from kind of a routinized, more of a predictive model from saying I'm going to take this percentage of pipeline in this stage and move it to that win rate, but being able to being hypothetical about specific deals. And seeing the impact of that. I know we all would like to, I'm motivated by things like that. I'm looking at a deal. I want to know, hey, if I get this to be a 5-year deal instead of a 2-year deal, what does that look like? And helping them to see the very real skin in the game. We see that driving behavior, certainly.
So one thing I think is interesting, I was having a conversation with a sales rep the other day, and I asked her, what is your goal, right? And she had talked about, well, I want to hit attainment each quarter for the next 4 quarters. I'm like, okay, no. What's your goal? Like, what's the commission going to do for you? And she was talking about how she was saving up for a house, right? Mm-hmm. It was her first home. And that's what made it real for me as an operator. Was like, okay, well, I'm always thinking about what does the business need? How's the business forecasting? But hardly ever like in those moments where I'm just talking to a rep, you get the idea of, okay, you're saving up for a car, you're saving up for a house, you're trying to put your child to school. And so those real conversations make it human for me, right? And then I start thinking about, your book, your territory is your business. The company you work for is giving you a license to go franchise and build a business of your own internally. And those deals, those opportunities, that's your pipeline that you can go build. Just like I'm helping, my head of sales or CRO forecast for the business. I want to give you the tools to do the same. You need to be able to, work backwards from a number and start thinking about all those different scenarios. And if you can do that, that's all the more motivation to not just work backwards, but also move forward. It's how many calls, how many emails do I need to make? If I position this deal and what I'm hearing in my deal, is leading me to think through what's the appropriate product strategy here. Is it a one product or a bundle, and moving forward from there and positioning your company to be successful as a solution that they're hopefully going to buy and ultimately lead to that commission that rep is looking for. So those are things that I love doing. And don't get me wrong, Jacob, I have done a fair amount of Excel and Google spreadsheet sidecarring with reps, and absolutely, you'd be surprised how many reps have mastered like index match, and it is truly impressive. Like what folks' spreadsheet skills. So now that we're thinking about advanced analytics, we've covered cross-functional goal alignment and thinking through moving the business from reactive to proactive. I'd be curious about how you're thinking about setting your organization up for success going into next year with SKO. Like, how do you normally communicate plans and changes and what's in it for the rep? I'm curious about your kind of that change management process. Carol, I'll turn to you.
Yeah. I think that it's frequent communication and early communication. So, as budgets are being worked now, we're already sharing top line numbers with the leadership team so that, it's not come January 1st and then people are shocked with, oh my God, this is my number. I didn't know I can hit it.
Or February 1st.
Or February, or even March sometimes, right? And so I think it's sharing early, sharing frequently, because even whatever number it is today, it might change, right? Most likely it will change before this, the official number is announced, whatever date that is. So I think making sure that sharing often, sharing early, and then hearing why those numbers change, and then adding commentary into, from your perspective or your point of view, to have a complete picture of why that number is either achievable, not achievable, under, so that it's a full picture of, that number that we put up is really something that's attainable. Because there's no point in putting a number that's way over and no one expects to achieve it, right? Those are then not realistic goals to have. And then therefore no one actually tries to achieve them. So you want to have challenging but achievable goals.
I love that. So, my personal goal is to get comp plans out by January 1st and have 100% satisfaction upon rolling those plans out with the reps. Here's the new plan. And everyone just rapturous applause. But I'm sure that always happens to everyone.
Seems very attainable.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jacob, I'm curious about your approach.
Yeah, my experience is not as much on kind of the SKO side. It's more on just the technical kind of implement operation side. But I do think, going back to your original point, in prior years from a planning perspective, I think a lot of companies had that ability, like, hey, the plan for next year is we need to grow the team. And so you're able to fill in talent gaps via hiring. You're able to, so I think there's, as kind of maybe the team growth rate slows a little bit coming into next year or continuing through into next year, you're likely going to see an increased emphasis on enablement, right? An increased emphasis on coaching and training and really kind of up-leveling the existing team, rather than thinking, hey, if I need to get kind of more experience on this org, I'm going to add, 30 people this year so I can make sure that those are more experienced. If you're only adding 3 people instead of that 30, but you still need that experience bump. So I think there'd be an opportunity for good opportunity to really focus on enablement and focus on that and using that as a way to make the team better, rather than bringing in. You're not gonna be able to hire the mentors. You're going to have to be the mentors in many cases. And maybe for a lot of young sales managers, it's their first time managing through this type of cycle. So that'll be, I think that'll be an increased emphasis for SKOs and kind of the train the manager kind of models for early in the year.
I think it's interesting. And both of you wax poetical on quite a breadth of topics, right? Like we spanned compensation and moved directly into account capacity planning and headcount as well. This is the time of year where this is the time of year where SDRs start to hear like, am I going to be promoted into account executive, right? And then the immense amount of stress that they're going to have to get through from transitioning from, you know, a tri-skill role, where, you know, trying to book meetings to a full-on AE, where now you're from cradle to grave, the entire deal. The question then is, okay, well, how do we build credibility for ops and sales managers by creating comp plans that are simple, sensible, highly communicable, and can be shown to the rep, hopefully at the time of sales kickoff or post kickoff. And shortly thereafter, the plan is sort of an afterthought, because it just makes complete sense to the organization. So I want to turn it to the audience. We've been, I think, a little quiet. So if anyone has any Q&A for us, if not, Jacob, Carol, and I can spitball a few questions just for funsies, since I think we have a great collective brain trust here. So, Jacob, are they coming for you? Are the sirens?
That's on my side. I'm in New York. There's always sirens.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'll go on mute.
No worries. I think we have a comment, so let me just pick this up. Oh, it's Angelica. She's asking for comments. Well, if there are no comments, I do want to thank our speakers for joining today. We'll give a minute to see if anyone has any comments, but I want to appreciate you both for dropping in your thoughts. I think the year has been challenging for different industries. And so as we go into FY23, I'm personally thinking through, like, what's the probability of us returning to a quote unquote back to normal scenario, or more of the same of what we're seeing, at least from the back half of this year. So those are the things that, you know, if you're a revenue operator or CRO on this call, you're thinking through, you know, what are those outlooks and how can your comp plans help you succeed there?
Absolutely. Well, I'm back to say thank you, Carol, Jeff, and Jacob, for your insights today. It was super valuable, and thank you everyone for attending today's MSP event. As a reminder, this event is recorded, so the key takeaways and the recording will be made available on the MSP previous event website before the end of day. And be sure to check out our sponsor, Captivate IQ, dropping their link as well, so definitely check them out. I've also dropped everyone's LinkedIn, so be sure to connect with Carol, Jeff, and Jacob on LinkedIn if you have a question for them. We'll end a little bit early today, so we'll give a few minutes back into your day, but thank you everyone for attending again, and we'll see you at the next event.
Everybody.